Right now, the Sussex brand is about to lose its most valuable multi-million-dollar asset. It is not their physical estate in Montecito or even those remaining Hollywood production deals. It is their origin story. For nearly a decade, the public bought a modern fairy tale, the chance meeting, a whirlwind romance, and a self-made global humanitarian who reluctantly, yet gracefully, stepped into a 1,000-year-old empire. But that carefully constructed high gloss is currently evaporating. Investigative biographer Tom Bower has laid bare a forensic trail of evidence that threatens to permanently delete the accidental princess myth. Could it be that the ultimate royal romance of the 21st century was never about luck? What if it was actually the final milestone in a highly calculated, step-by-step corporate takeover? If Bower is right, the entire foundation of the Sussex brand rests on a lie. And once that origin story collapses, their financial value plunges to absolute zero. To understand the sheer scale of this crisis, we must look past those palace gates and analyze the deep friction between Hollywood ambition and royal tradition. During her engagement interview, Meghan Markle famously claimed she knew almost nothing about Prince Harry. She insisted she never grew up obsessing over the British royals, asking their mutual friend only one simple question before that blind date: is he nice? Or so she said, but behind the closed doors of Kensington Palace, senior courtiers and investigative journalists were already uncovering a starkly different reality. In fact, Tom Bower's investigations revealed that Meghan's arrival in London was no accidental detour. It was the culmination of a highly systematic, multi-year campaign to break into the British upper class. Following her divorce from producer Trevor Engelson, Bower documents how Meghan actively shifted her focus toward the United Kingdom as early as 2013. And the issue wasn't just that she wanted a wealthy partner. She understood that Hollywood fame is fleeting, but royal association is permanent. That reality created immediate, invisible friction with the palace infrastructure, an infrastructure built entirely on a foundation of discretion, public service, and absolute selflessness. A historic institution was about to collide head-on with a professional brand strategist. The stakes escalated rapidly when Meghan's research met Harry's deep psychological vulnerabilities. According to Bower, Meghan didn't just walk into that London club blind. Days before their meeting, she conducted exhaustive forensic-level research on Prince Harry. She mapped out his insecurities, his profound grief over his mother, his passion for African conservation, and his desperate search for a protective, maternal figure to validate his anger toward the media. When they finally met, Meghan executed what psychological analysts call love bombing with total surgical precision. She didn't just agree with his passions, she mirrored them completely. She enthusiastically supported his dreams of abandoning royal life to live in South Africa, even scouting out properties via WhatsApp groups to make the illusion feel entirely real. Harry was instantly captivated, famously declaring right after their very first date that he knew she was the one. But this wasn't just love at first sight, it was the careful, flawless performance of an actress who knew exactly how to play the role of a lifetime. Escalation was swift, and the palace vetting machine was completely bypassed before they even realized a major player had entered the board. Here is the first twist. Senior royals genuinely believed they were welcoming a modern actress who would help update the monarchy. Instead, they were witnessing a highly sophisticated, corporate-style hostile takeover. In business, a hostile takeover happens when an outside entity grabs a controlling stake in an established company, rebrands its core assets, and purges the original shareholders who built the whole foundation. Once the ring was on her finger, Meghan Markle didn't adapt to the House of Windsor. She immediately began treating it as a platform to elevate her personal global brand. Bower's investigation reveals that Meghan's sights were never set on Shropshire or the quiet, dutiful life of a British Duchess opening local community centers. Her ultimate target was always California. She tolerated those royal protocols only as a necessary, high-value pre-production phase. The crown was used as a premium global stamp of legitimacy, a credential she could later monetize for hundreds of millions of dollars in Silicon Valley and Hollywood. She wasn't joining the firm, she was acquiring its prestige to launch her own global IPO. And that leaves us with a devastating, unresolved question. If the fairy tale was actually a highly engineered corporate launch, what happens to the brand now that their founding prospectus has been exposed to the public? When a company goes public based on a fabricated origin story, the discovery of that lie triggers a catastrophic loss of investor confidence. In 2026, Harry and Meghan are facing that exact brand liquidation. The public, weary of polished PR narratives and endless legal silencers, is starting to look at the raw data. If Harry was only a pawn in a larger calculated scheme to bypass the Hollywood hierarchy, can they ever regain the trust of a global audience? Or will they be remembered not as global humanitarians, but as the ultimate opportunists who used a nation's heritage as a stepping stone? The truth, as documented by Tom Bauer, is cold, calculated, and entirely unredacted. Meghan Markle did not stumble into the royal family by some twist of fate. She engineered her way in with forensic precision, using her talents, her resilience, and her absolute refusal to let anyone stand in her way. The fairy tale is officially over. The strategic corporate reality has begun. But as we prepare to look deeper into how she systematically dismantled Harry's inner circle to secure her absolute control, we must ask ourselves how far she was willing to go to ensure her dominance to successfully execute a corporate takeover. First, you must isolate the target. In the high-stakes restructuring of Prince Harry's life, this meant the immediate, systematic elimination of his most loyal, lifelong allies. Right now, Prince Harry is facing a complete personal liquidation, the absolute loss of his oldest, most loyal support network. Before Meghan Markle came along, Harry was backed by a tight, protective circle. These were men who had shielded him since his Eton days, knew his raw vulnerabilities, and held the keys to his real past. But according to investigative biographer Tom Bauer, this inner circle posed an outright threat to the carefully crafted Sussex narrative. They knew the unpolished, unedited Harry. They knew his history long before it was packaged and rebranded for a massive American audience. To protect the survival of their new brand, these old friendships simply could not be allowed to exist alongside the new order. They had to be quietly purged, leaving Harry isolated with just one single source of truth, Meghan herself. The friction between Harry's old world and Meghan's vision first exploded during a shooting weekend at Sandringham back in 2017. It was supposed to be a standard social gathering, a chance for Meghan to meet Harry's closest confidants, men who shared his background, his humor, and his high society life. But the clash was immediate and sharp. Tom Bauer's investigation reveals that Meghan had no intention of blending in or quietly watching how this circle worked. Instead, she challenged them directly, calling out Harry's friends over jokes and comments she found offensive regarding feminism, gender, and modern social politics. For friends who had spent decades trading unchecked aristocratic banter, this felt like an entirely unprecedented intrusion. They weren't just offended by her speaking up, they were deeply rattled by her immediate, unyielding demand for total conformity. It became instantly clear that being around Meghan meant walking on eggshells, constantly watched by a self-appointed moral arbiter. The tension quickly escalated from social awkwardness to a cold ultimatum right after that weekend. Bauer documents how Meghan reportedly gave Harry a stark, non-negotiable choice: his old friends or his new future. She argued that these men simply didn't fit the progressive, forward-thinking image they wanted for their global platform. Harry, swept up in the intense grip of love bombing and desperate to save his relationship, gave in to the pressure. The fallout was swift and incredibly brutal. When invitations for the 2018 royal wedding went out, Harry's oldest mates made a shocking discovery. They were invited to the public ceremony at St. George's Chapel, but completely shut out of the exclusive evening reception at Frogmore House. These were men who had supported Harry through his darkest psychological struggles, yet they were sidelined. Instead, the evening party was packed with Hollywood elite, television executives, and major global media power brokers. people who had never even met the couple, but offered massive promotional value to the rising Sussex brand. Here is the twist that shatters the fairy tale. This systematic purging of old friends was not some emotional overreaction. It was a deliberate, cold brand cleansing. In the corporate world, when companies merge, they actively sweep away legacy risks. The Sussex PR machine saw Harry's oldest friends as unpredictable, unmanaged liabilities they couldn't afford to keep around. They held too many real memories and couldn't be silenced by non-disclosure agreements or Hollywood publicists. By freezing them out, Meghan did more than protect her husband's privacy. She established a total monopoly over his reality. A classic example of this happened during the wedding of his closest childhood friend, Tom Skippy and Skip, down in Jamaica. Tom Bower's investigation reveals that when Harry and Meghan showed up, the atmosphere was incredibly strained. Meghan reportedly criticized the service and the food, leaving a heavy, awkward chill among the guests. Shortly after, Skip, the man who had traveled the world with Harry and shared his deepest secrets, was permanently cast out. The message to the rest of Harry's circle was loud and clear: fall in line with the new regime or face instant exile. This leaves us with a haunting, unresolved question. What actually happens to a man when you strip away every single person who remembers his true history? By 2026, the heavy mental toll of this isolation is painfully obvious. Harry has changed from a beloved, charismatic prince into a deeply isolated figure, constantly lashing out at his family and the media. Without his old mates to keep him grounded, he is fully dependent on the narrative built for him in Montecito. But as unredacted files continue to leak, and as old allies quietly speak to investigative journalists, the fragile walls of this isolation are starting to crack. Can Harry ever rebuild the brotherhoods he sacrificed for global branding? Or has he burned those bridges so completely that he is now permanently trapped inside his own gold-plated fortress? That social purge in 2018 was a masterclass in strategic isolation. Meghan Markle knew that to control the Sussex future, she had to control the prince's past. She systematically dismantled his support network, swapping genuine loyalty for transactional Hollywood alliances. His oldest friends were left in the cold, forced to watch their childhood companion turn into a highly managed corporate asset. But this was just the first phase. With his friends successfully neutralized, the strategic focus shifted to an even larger, more powerful target: the blood relatives who actually held the keys to sovereign authority. Right now, the Sussex brand is facing an absolute constitutional lockout. By trying to aggressively rewrite the terms of their royal standing, Harry and Meghan have completely lost their greatest asset, their institutional legitimacy. For a brief, dazzling moment in 2018, they held the keys to a modern global alliance. They were positioned as forward-facing ambassadors of a 1,000-year-old dynasty, a union that combined the majestic historical weight of Windsor with the dynamic, progressive energy of modern media. But according to biographer Tom Bower, behind the high-gloss imagery of balcony appearances and state banquets, a cold administrative war was raging. Meghan Markle did not see the British monarchy as an institution of lifelong selfless service. She saw the royal family as an outdated, slow-moving legacy corporation, one ripe for a hostile takeover. But she pushed the institution too far too fast, triggering a permanent defensive freeze from the crown. Now, in 2026, that royal alliance is completely shattered. The Sussexes are locked out of the family balance sheet, stripped of the institutional weight that gave their brand its multi-million-dollar value. The friction between Meghan's corporate branding and the unyielding machinery of the British state came to a head before she even walked down the aisle. In a traditional monarchy, the institution is the central sun. Every individual royal is just a satellite orbiting it, reflecting its light. Service and staying in the background are non-negotiable terms. But Meghan's Hollywood training was built on the exact opposite principle: personal branding, high visibility, and making money off her private identity. Tom Bower's investigations reveal that from her very first months behind palace walls, Meghan found the endless rules intolerable. She was reportedly deeply frustrated by the modest financial allowances given to senior royals. She hated the grueling schedule of opening community halls in rainy towns and having to clear every single statement through the palace press office. She refused to be a quiet, dutiful cog in the royal machine. She wanted to be the main attraction. This triggered a silent Cold War with palace courtiers. They knew her highly commercialized Hollywood approach could never work with the constitutional neutrality of the crown. Inside the family, psychological tension escalated rapidly as Meghan began to draw comparisons and push Harry to compare her to the ultimate icon, Princess Diana. According to Bauer, this narrative did not just happen naturally among the public. It was a highly calculated storyline that Meghan and Harry pushed aggressively behind closed doors. Harry, still traumatized by the tragic loss of his mother and harboring a bitter grudge against the press, fell completely into the trap. Meghan mirrored Diana's style, her expressive body language, and her public vulnerability with uncanny accuracy. She played directly on Harry's deepest fear that history would repeat itself and his wife would suffer the same tragic fate as his mother unless they fought back. But Bauer reveals the palace saw this comparison as a mix of profound delusion and strategic manipulation. While Diana spent decades earning her humanitarian legacy by working directly with the sick and marginalized, Meghan was accused of using Diana's memory as a shield against any legitimate press criticism. She painted herself as a perpetual victim to win public sympathy, a strategic twist the palace saw coming from miles away. Meghan's ultimate goal was never to modernize the monarchy from the inside. It was to destabilize it just enough to justify a highly lucrative exit. In the high-stakes world of business, you do not build a brand on someone else's land. Meghan realized that as long as she stayed in the UK, she would always play second fiddle to William and Catherine. She would always be a mere subsidiary of the main corporate entity, subject to a veto from the Queen and the future King. Bauer documents how Meghan and Harry secretly laid the groundwork for their commercial empire in California long before they announced their exit to the world. They trademarked Sussex Royal for hundreds of products and held private meetings with American television executives. They built a highly sophisticated PR machine in Los Angeles, all while still drawing millions of dollars from the sovereign grant. The paparazzi drama with her father, the bridesmaid dress dispute with Catherine, and the constant leaks to American reporters were not just random family squabbles. They were the carefully curated justification for a highly profitable divorce from the monarchy, a corporate spin-off designed to launch a global brand free from royal service. This leaves the Sussexes in 2026 facing a devastating, unresolved crisis. Their entire commercial appeal in America was based on their status as active, senior British royals who chose to walk away. But a royal title only keeps its premium value if it is backed by the authority of the reigning monarch. By completely cutting ties and launching relentless media attacks through memoirs and documentaries, and refusing to reconcile, the Sussexes have forced the crown to execute an absolute administrative freeze. The palace has quietly, systematically removed them from all official representations of the monarchy. They have been stripped of their patronages, military appointments, and the ability to use their Royal Highness titles in any commercial capacity without the active backing of the crown. Without that backing, the Sussex brand is rapidly losing its luxury status, fading into just another overexposed celebrity name. If the public stops seeing them as exiled royalty and starts viewing them as desperate former reality stars selling household goods, how will they fund their ultra-luxurious, highly secured lifestyle in Montecito? The royal purge of 2020 was the ultimate gamble, but the house always wins. Meghan Markle believed she could outmaneuver a 1,000-year-old institution using a modern Hollywood playbook of publicity and victimhood. She successfully pulled Harry away from his family, but that move severed the very roots feeding their global relevance. The palace's cold, stoic silence became a financial and reputational black hole, slowly draining the Sussex brand year after year. Now, with commercial deals stalling and their royal credentials dead, the focus of their desperation has shifted. To survive this financial bleeding, they must double down on their last asset, a calculated, high-stakes war of reputation management. They are locked in a devastating war of financial attrition, and they are about to lose their priciest shield, the power to buy public favor in the ruthless arena of global influence. Reputation isn't just an asset. It is a cash flow calculation. For years, the Sussex brand marketed itself as a beacon of progressive philanthropy, empathy, and social justice. They lecture the world on mental health, online safety, and corporate responsibility. But according to investigator Tom Bauer and financial analysts, behind this wall of moral superiority lies a staggering multi-million-dollar defensive operation. Every single month, hundreds of thousands of dollars quietly drain from their corporate entity, Archewell, not to fund charity, but to pay for high-end crisis managers, elite Hollywood lawyers, and digital reputation cleansers. The threat of ruin is absolute. If their money runs dry, the non-disclosure agreements, the protective digital algorithms, and those expensive legal silencers will instantly vanish, leaving their real, unedited history completely exposed to the highest bidder. The clash between their public sermons on healing and their private, aggressive legal maneuvers has created a massive credibility gap. In the corporate world, a company's ledger has to match its marketing. If a brand sells eco-friendly products but secretly dumps toxic waste in rivers, that hypocrisy destroys their value the moment it is exposed. For Harry and Meghan, that toxic waste is the trail of broken professional relationships, NDAs, and silenced former staff. Tom Bauer's investigation reveals that the Sussexes have used some of the most aggressive, terrifyingly expensive law firms in London and Los Angeles to enforce absolute silence. Former Palisades charity partners and even childhood friends have received intimidating, multi-page legal letters warning of ruinous lawsuits if they speak to the press or leak any behind-the-scenes details. This creates an intense, quiet friction with the free speech and open dialogue the Sussexes claim to champion through their Archewell Foundation. They hawk empathy in action while deploying a scorched earth legal policy to crush any dissenting voice. The stakes escalated when the public began looking past polished press releases to analyze the raw financial filings of the Archewell Foundation. According to tax filings and independent audits, a shocking disparity has emerged. While Archewell aggressively promotes its partnerships with global mental health initiatives, the actual cash distributed to grassroots charities is dwarfed by astronomical fees paid to PR firms like Sunshine Sachs and elite legal teams. This psychological shift is deeply damaging to their core audience. People can tolerate a wealthy celebrity living in a $14 million Montecito mansion, but they will not tolerate a brand that uses a tax-exempt charity as a tool to fund personal legal wars and protect an elite lifestyle. Every time a new financial report drops, the contrast between their public philanthropy and private self-preservation becomes impossible to ignore. The story is shifting from exiled humanitarians to corporate self-promoters, desperately using charity as a tax-efficient shield to protect their personal wealth. Here is the real twist that exposes the sheer panic inside the Sussex operation. Their multi-million-dollar legal wall was never built to protect privacy. It was built to prevent a catastrophic narrative default. In finance, a default happens when you can't pay your debts, triggering an immediate liquidation of everything you own. For Harry and Meghan, their main debt is the public's belief in their victimhood. The moment the world realizes they were not helpless victims of a cold royal institution, but were actually aggressive players who refused to compromise their entire brand defaults. Bauer's investigation exposes how their lawyers spent over $10,000 in legal fees for every single dollar Thomas Markle earned from his occasional media appearances. This is not a rational strategy. It is a desperate, hyperinflated panic response. They aren't fighting to protect their safety. They are fighting to stop a retired lighting director in Mexico from releasing raw, unedited family archives that would permanently debunk the carefully curated Meghan Markle origin story. A fortress of paper and threats has been built, but it's an expensive one, requiring a constant, massive influx of commercial cash to maintain. This leaves the Sussexes in 2026 facing a devastating, unresolved financial crisis. That multi-million-dollar defensive wall only stands if they keep securing massive, high-paying corporate contracts with the likes of Netflix, Spotify, and major publishing houses. But those entertainment giants are not charities. They expect a massive return on investment. With their commercial partnerships collapsing, their Spotify deal dead, and their Netflix contract facing severe scrutiny, the Sussexes are running out of cash to fund their defensive machinery. If they can no longer afford to pay elite PR firms to bury negative search results, and if they can't afford the astronomical legal fees required to keep former staff and family members silent under NDA, once that wall finally cracks, when a major lawsuit gets settled or a key NDA is legally challenged and shattered, a dam of unredacted testimony will burst, flooding the market with raw evidence that no amount of PR spin can fix. The math behind the Sussex brand simply does not add up. Meghan and Harry spent a fortune trying to buy a flawless, globally admired reputation while silencing everyone who knew the unpolished truth. But silence in Hollywood and London is just a rental, not a purchase. And that rent is going up every single day. They have trapped themselves in an unsustainable loop of high-priced paranoia, spending millions to protect a narrative that is already crumbling under investigative journalism. Now, with their finances under intense pressure and their credibility at an all-time low, they have been forced into one final, desperate commercial gamble to keep their heads above water. The Sussexes are on the verge of losing the one thing keeping them relevant in global capitalism, their actual commercial viability. To survive in Montecito, Harry and Meghan require a constant stream of massive corporate cash. Their luxurious lifestyle, security detail, and multi-million-dollar legal battles require a real empire that actually generates wealth, not just headlines. But according to investigator Tom Bauer, their ability to monetize that royal connection is officially hitting a dead end. With their main contracts collapsing, Meghan launched a desperate, last-ditch commercial gamble, pivoting from political victimhood to domestic lifestyle luxury. The risk here is absolute. If this pivot fails, they do not just lose a business. They lose the financial power to stay independent from the crown, forcing them into a humiliating state of permanent brand appreciation. The clash between Meghan's high-end commercial goals and the cold reality of global supply chains peaked spectacularly during the launch of her lifestyle brand. To cast herself as a domestic maven, she sent hand-labeled jars of strawberry jam to top Hollywood influencers. This implied the product was an artisanal luxury harvested directly from her private Montecito gardens. Behind this premium, rustic illusion lay a devastating clash. Bauer's investigation reveals the jam was actually bulk manufactured in basic industrial plants in Ohio and Illinois using generic jars bought from cheap commercial suppliers. When reporters tracked the shipping records and manufacturing lines, the contrast was absolutely glaring. You cannot sell yourself as an authentic artisan while secretly shipping mass-produced goods dressed up in fancy packaging. People felt the gap between the elite marketing and the cheap industrial reality. The entire launch stalled before ever reaching store shelves. The stakes jumped dramatically when the entertainment industry itself started openly rejecting the Sussex brand as a low-yield, toxic investment. Major streaming platforms and talent agencies are not sentimental. They run on cold metrics of audience engagement. For years, Netflix and Spotify tolerated erratic schedules because the Sussex name guaranteed viewers. But as the public tired of their repetitive, grievance-based content, those numbers began to plunge. Losing their Spotify deal, followed by top executives publicly calling them grifters, sparked absolute panic in Montecito. Bauer reveals how the Sussexes tried to save face, quickly announcing new projects like dynamic polo documentaries and cooking shows. But the failure was inevitable. Audiences did not want to watch an exiled prince play an inaccessible elite sport or see a duchess pretend to cook in a rented mansion. The massive gap between what the Sussexes wanted to make and what people actually wanted to watch became a chasm. Here is the corporate twist that seals their checkmate. Netflix has quietly started a permanent exit from the Sussex partnership. In the corporate world, when a partnership consistently misses its targets, the main funding partner does not issue a dramatic public firing. Instead, they execute a silent, structured phase-out to protect their own stock value. While the Sussex PR team continues to announce projects in development to keep people interested, Bauer's sources confirm the streaming giant has already begun winding down their budget. Those steep production costs of their lifestyle and sports content were simply too high for the projected audience. The ultimate corporate irony here is sharp. Meghan tried to use Netflix to bypass the royal family and build an independent platform, but she ended up trapped in a stressful Hollywood contract where she was completely expendable. They did not conquer Hollywood. They were chewed up and spat out by its cold commercial machine. This leaves the Sussexes facing a devastating, unresolved commercial crisis. Without a major streaming contract to bankroll their lives, and with her lifestyle brand mocked as mass-produced industrial goods, how do they make the millions needed to maintain their elite status? They spent 5 years burning bridges with the British monarchy, making any return to royal duties constitutionally impossible. But they also burned bridges with Hollywood's top power brokers, who now see them as overexposed, difficult, and completely toxic. If they cannot go back to London and cannot succeed in Los Angeles, where do they go? Their commercial vaults are closed, the corporate funding is drying up, and the world is moving on to fresh, less chaotic cultural icons. The collapse of their commercial empire was entirely predictable. Meghan Markle believed she could apply the fast fashion, highly polished rules of Hollywood PR to an identity that actually requires deep generational trust. She treated her royal title like a corporate logo, and the public responded by treating her products with absolute skepticism. Those jars of industrial jam, canceled podcasts, and stalled documentaries are the physical proof of a brand that has completely lost its footing. Now, with their financial runway rapidly shortening, the ultimate price of their calculated rise must be paid.